That's our taxation.
Good afternoon and welcome to this panel session in the Spanish Pavilion about the business climate action and its contribution to the global stocktake. We are very lucky with this panel. We have the view of a very important international organization and also leading companies in climate action. I have the pleasure to introduce you Mr. Roberto Suarez. Roberto is the Secretary General of the International Organization of Employers. Prior to that, Roberto was the ILO Program Director for the Promotion of Youth Employment in the Maghreb region. Before that, he previously worked in COE, in the Spanish Confederation of Employers and Industries, and he has been very active in the international arena in Business Europe, business at OECD. He's an expert in labor relations and international labor law. We also have, welcome Roberto, and thank you for joining us. We also have Maria Mendiluce. She is the CEO of the Women Business Coalition. Maria is an expert in sustainable development, energy and climate action with many years. I don't like to say the years because it's too many years. We don't need to know how many. As many, at least as many as me. As CEO of the Women Business Coalition, she works with non-profit and corporate partners to provide guide to companies to the net zero. Up to date, Maria has been able with her coalition to mobilize 13,000 companies that have committed to Paris-aligned emissions reduction and has brought the business voice to the G7, G20, and the UNFCCC. Thank you, Maria, for joining us.
Gracias.
We then have Noreen. Noreen Kennedy has also been working in international arena for climate action. I'm not going to say
Don't
how
say
many
years.
years.
Please don't say years.
Noreen has been there forever, since the beginning.
Yes, that's right.
She works for the U.S. Council for International Businesses. She's the lead in environment, energy, and climate change. She promotes the U.S. business participation to observe and inform international policy deliberation across many multilateral system settings. No? She has served as business and industry focal point for the UN Environment Program and co-chairs the business and industry major group to the UN in New York. She has been representing businesses since Rio in 1992, so she knows very well all the trajectory of the business input to these negotiations. Thank you very much, Noreen. It's a pleasure to have you with us. And then we have the view of companies. We have Joaquin Molina, Hydrogen and Clean Energies Director at CEPSA. David is the director. He is developing CEPSA's green hydrogen and sustainable fuels strategy with a target to operate and build the 2 gigawatts of equivalent green hydrogen production in 2030. And he is also working in the Valle Andaluz del Hidrógeno, a very big and strategic project of hydrogen that we have in Spain. Thank you very much. And then we have David Roth, International Public Policy Director at Amazon. David started his career as International Trade Specialist of the U.S. Department of Commerce, and he has worked representing multinational clients before all relevant U.S. government agencies as attorney. He was Senior Policy Advisor at the Office of the U.S. Trade Office and the Executive Office of the President. Finally, he started to work at Amazon, where nowadays he's the Director of Public Policy. Thank you very much.
And I only have 1 or 2 years of experience. I just look old. You should have seen me at the beginning of COP.
Okay, perfect.
I had lots of hair, 20 kilos later.
Perfect, well noted. So we are having, first of all, the view of the organizations, and then coming to have your insights from the companies. And I can start by Maria. Do you want to be the first one? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So it's a great pleasure. So I think, Cristina and me, we go a long way in this process, and thank you, Cristina. for your leadership. It's been amazing what you've done. First at UNESA and now at the COE. And yeah, Spain is lucky to have you there. And I'm very happy to be with you in this panel. So, well, here we are. I mean, this is a critical COP. It is a COP where we need to take stock on what has happened since Paris, and it's a COP where we also need to look forward. And yes, you know, we're not doing that great, right? Emissions continue to increase. Yet, if you are in any of the conversations in this COP, it's really exciting what is happening. So here, Amazon, in 3-5 years, you have become the world's largest buyer of renewable energy, just like this. It's not as easy as that, I know, but it's incredible how fast, you know, you can become that if you are committed. And you mentioned before there are 13,000 companies committed. 7,000 of those are SMEs, okay? So they're not the Amazon, it's just the other side of the spectrum. But still, every business around the world knows that we are in a big transition. There is a great opportunity, and many businesses want to be part of it. Now, when we look at this COP, as I say, it's here. I have to say that the COP presidency has done a big effort, and it is delivering quite a lot of things. But I wouldn't say even the elephant in the room, because it is the topic and the flavor of COP, is the fossil fuel phase-out conversation. And I think we are mature enough to have this conversation. So at Women Business, we did a corporate global stocktake. And we asked 300 business leaders to see, you know, how things were going. And I'm reading some of the data because there's a lot of things happening and in that report, which I welcome you to read. But maybe the big, you know, takeaway for us was that 70% of the respondents across sectors expect a transition away from fossil fuel usage by 2050. So some were more optimistic than others. Road transport, 80% expect that shift by 2050. But in the short term, 20% of the power sector believes that that can happen in 2030. And truly, yeah, we know that in Spain, there are many companies that are part of that group. Yeah, I think most of the power sector in Spain. Cristina has something to do in that, right? It all started at UNESA a while ago. So thank you, Cristina. So with this in mind, yeah, we launched the Fossil to Clean campaign. So what we are asking to governments at this COP is that in the final outcome of the global stocktake, there is a reference to 3 things. We need to triple renewable, double energy efficiency, and have some takes on fossil fuel phase-out. And we need to do it now because the transition is going to take between 17 and 25 years. Yeah? But it needs to start now. And the fossil fuel industry should not be investing in new infrastructure because the market is going clean and because we don't want to pay for the stranded assets, you know, that development will imply. And I have to say that we've been very lucky to have these 200 leading companies because no one had been as maybe bold as we have been at this COP. But we might have felt a bit lonely at the beginning, but now there is a lot of business groups that are supporting us with many statements that are going in that direction. And it's not only us, it's the health workers, 45 million health workers have signed a similar statement, and C40 has done the same. So there is a movement that is coming out of this COP that looks with a lot of respect to what the oil and gas industry has done, because honestly, we are fueled 80% by oil and gas, but we need to have the determination to move, you know, from fossil to clean. And that starts with a political statement that then will be brought into the NDCs, that then will be brought in the regulations that then affect business every day and ourselves as well in helping us make the right choices we have to make. So thank you. I look forward to the discussion. Yeah, we have a lot of work to be done, but yeah, I feel quite energized, even if tired, of the conversations we're having at this COP. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. And Roberto, your point of view from the international organization of employers? How you see in the business sector in the climate action?
It's a broad topic, and my perspective is the perspective of many business, not of a single area, of a single, sector. And at the end of the day, we in IOE have to deal on a daily basis with local business that come from developing economies, where all the debate that we are having here, these 70,000 people that are gathering here, feel a little bit far away. And I'm using an euphemism when I say far away. So what's the contribution of business and how, well, you refer to the global Stocktake and how we move forward, what are the takeaways from this COP? My question is how I come back to my members, and I will have to report to my members in 142 countries, where we have different COAs in the world, and also the big companies, the big players that are here with us or normally are very much aware, like the Amazon, Cepsa. But how we explain that this is relevant for them, and how we explain them what's the action is needed for them, and what's the anticipation that is needed from them. Of course, in many business organizations, you will have that already much ahead in their discussions, and also in developing economies, because climate action is there, because climate effects are there also. And you can go to, I yesterday gave the example of Bangladesh, and there they have strong issues with impacting jobs because of climate change happening there. In many islands also that's so relevant because of the effect that that's having. So these local business organizations are really engaging. Then, of course, we have companies having to commit and also having to be decarbonized to some extent, and I don't want to enter into the polemic whether we are phasing out or are, stopping and finishing in the short term. I know that there is ambition. We have to put ambition, but these commitments need, and we discussed that yesterday, needs a good pedagogical element, and need a good communication, and especially need to show a strong business case. So you have really to be able to put in evidence that taking the approach of decarbonizing the net zero and the commitment is business now, and there is no way you can escape that. I can tell you that sometimes that's not easy. Not easy at all. You have backlash, you have, questioning, legitimate questioning. And we as global business organization have also a duty, but also a duty to consider the legitimate questions that they are providing to us. How we can contribute also further has to do, first of all, with the systemic issues that small and medium companies tackle to survive in the middle and long term. In the International Labour Organization, we design a concept which is sustainable enterprises, which has to do with the capacity of business to be sustainable in the middle and long term, and the conducive environment to get there. We refer to the 80% of business finance needed to get for decarbonization and net zero. It's a big ambition, and I keep saying this is not just about financial contribution. And I could say more, it's not about just individual commitments. It has to do with the capacity for business to innovate and create. Those countries where the business environment is not there, or where even business are treated in a manner with some, I would use this word, intimidation, or not really having the regulatory framework that drives action. Those countries that really do not think small first when providing new regulations and institutions, you will see that the creativeness and innovation capacity is diminishing. And there is evidence on that. So when you think about how business can engage, you also have really to seriously take into consideration as public policy how you are treating this business in general terms. And this is a powerful message. We also need to bear in consideration, and that's the area in which we are much more perhaps committed as business organization IOE, there are other players here, that the just transition angle should not become the second or the third tier in this conversation. We have now important discussions on the program for just transition, but it's just now that it comes much more evident. We have been doing some work, not just in the International Labour Organization, but also with other players. But basically, this work is saying us there is nothing more unsustainable than not having job opportunities. Believe it or not, you can push with commitments of transformation, with innovation, with solutions, and it's incredible, it's amazing, it's encouraging. But if you don't have the opportunities for people, for this 70%, 60% of the total occupied population, which is in the informal sector, we could not get there, even in the middle or long term. And that's also a contribution from business. So in order to really push with ambition, you need to deal with weak institutions, with corruption, with regulations, and also trying to engage better those players that perhaps are sometimes letting behind. And I'm not talking about just my organizations and local organizations. Sometimes also important players, as stakeholders, that have a key role to play also to getting us there. This is the approach that we come with. This is the ambition that we play. We have a strong and powerful convening capacity as business and representing local business, but it's far away from being leveraged as it should. And that's where we want to go.
Okay, thank you. I would like to come back later to that, to the role of SMEs and of the associations, no, and international associations in that, in the engagement of businesses. Noreen, you've been following the private sector input to these negotiations and to the climate action, and how are you seeing their input to the global stocktake in the world the work you are doing?
Well, thank you for the invitation, and it's been really interesting to listen to Maria and to listen to Roberto, and I'm always very happy to listen to Roberto in the International Organization of Employers, of which we are the U.S. affiliate. And I would have to agree with everything I've heard. I mean, Maria has said very clearly that we're at an unprecedented COP. It's unprecedented because of the challenge and the urgency and the fact that there are these tremendous gaps. It's also unprecedented because of its complexity. It's unprecedented, obviously, because of how many business people are here and very keen to work. And we've heard some fantastic announcements at the beginning. And so we're potentially on a wave with a lot of people that we could hopefully ride to a better outcome. I want to talk about business engagement and expertise as being essential to achieving a kind of a triangle outcome from this COP that relates to the global stocktake, but also brings along with it the nationally determined contributions, their second generation, and the just transition that we just heard Roberto speaking so eloquently about. And our premise is that business connects those three and makes them more than the sum of their parts. So why does business care about the global stocktake? It's kind of a wonky, geeky thing. I mean, certainly we understand that it is the foundation on which we're going to build the next round of action, of collective action. And one thing that's very striking about the global stocktake exercise for all of us, I think we see, is we remember, first of all, from the first NDCs that were prepared and where we were, what the circumstances were, what the scientific understanding was, what our economic situation was to today, where we're looking at our next chapter of effort, a lot has changed. Also in the UN Framework Convention process and stresses and strains on multilateralism and a whole host of other things. And it's very clear to my organization, which is a U.S. business organization. We also represent U.S. employers. We're also part of the Major Economies Business Forum, which CEOE is also part of, and which brings together multi-sectoral groups, that more than ever, we need an economy-wide approach. We need to bring all the sectors together. We need to engage all the non-state actors, as they call us here, or non-party actors. We have to be much more cross-cutting and synergistic in our work, and we have to look at not just systems thinking, but systems doing. So here's the opportunity of the global Stocktake. Systems doing and systems thinking. Fantastic. We're very excited. But one of the things that I'm working on through the Major Economies Business Forum, or BISMEF, I'll call it, is kind of a stocktake of the stocktake, if I can call it so. We started to get very interested in the stocktake because of work we had done on the first round of NDCs through BISMEF, where we tried to understand how business had been involved in actually working with governments or being consulted by governments to build them. And it was a very successful project, and we learned a lot. And so we thought in BISMEF, let's do this for the stocktake. So we started with the technical phase, and we began to read submissions, and we began to participate. And the good news was, about the technical phase of the stocktake, the doors were open to us. We could put submissions. I think We Mean Business made submissions, right? Maria, you'd put in a great submission. Many business groups made submissions. Many governments made submissions. And we started to read them. And we started to notice that there wasn't actually, besides the business submissions themselves, much mention of business. If you did a word search and you looked at the subject matter of the technical phase inputs, it was about mitigation, it was about planning, it was about technology innovation, it was about investment, all things that business does, but no mention of business. So we thought, well, let's wait till the synthesis report comes out. And then we looked at the synthesis report. And not surprisingly, again, we saw very little reference to business. So then we thought, we're coming to COP28. Let's read the papers for the global stocktake. And there was a building blocks paper. I think all of us saw it. One mention of the business community. And now we have a negotiating text that is going forward. And I think there are 3 mentions of business. It was great to hear that a number of governments did speak about business, did call for the inclusion of business. I mean, it's always civil society or non-party stakeholders, but some actual distinct mentions of business. And we think that's promising and something on which to build, because it's absolutely clear without the business community hardwired in, engineered into the global stocktake and the resulting NDCs, we will once again leave resources on the table. We will once again not take full advantage of what we can bring to just transition that Roberto has spoken about so clearly. We will not be able to make the very ambitious energy transition that Maria has been working on and really championing. And we won't be able to deliver the positive impact, because we're doing this because it's going to be better. But if we don't engage with SMEs, if we don't bring in the voices of business communities and employers' federations in the Global South, we will miss important players and important benefits. So I think my takeaway is to think of, all of us to think of the global stocktake and the just transition as happening together, hopefully happening together, knock wood. And the business community is what connects those 2 efforts. Think of us as the muscle that connects those 2. And what we really need is strong muscles that are working together. And smart brains. And I think in the business community we bring a lot of innovative thought. We're willing to partner, we're willing to build trust, we're willing to dialogue. So over the next 2 years, we would love to stay in touch with all of you as we work through the 2-year process that takes us to COP30. I hope I'll still be here. I think I will. This year is our 30th anniversary working in the UNFCCC, and it's a labor of love for us. Not least of which because A, we achieve results together, and B, because of the wonderful people and the fantastic colleagues that are here, and the fact that we have a shared vision that we can make happen. So let me stop there, and I'm looking forward to hearing other speakers. And again, thanks for inviting me.
And this is for Maria, and I cannot resist asking you, for Maria and Noreen, don't you think, or maybe it's a misperception I have, but don't you think that the biggest the participation of businesses in the scopes and the more clear that the climate action lies in the companies, the less we can find, we find references in the official texts, no? And then how is this mismatch happening?
Completely.
But you agree, you agree.
Completely.
Perfect.
And it's so interesting, this analysis, and there's something, that's why, I think the cities, I don't know, it's like not, okay, let me not say more.
It's so puzzling because organizations like Maria's or the hard work that IOE does, or so many others that are here, and then let's not even talk about individual companies, Spanish employers. I mean, we're all in. So many of us are all in, and it does seem counterlogical not to take advantage of what didn't exist 20 years ago or 30 years ago. For example, I would come to these meetings and there would be 5 business people, and they wouldn't necessarily be calling for action. I'll just leave it at that. And now we have multiple organizations and CEOs and banks and every kind of business sector and nationality and level, engineers and everything you can think of. And yet, for whatever reason, the governments don't want to crowd us in. It's one of the things that we will be calling for as the Major Economies Business Forum in the 2 years, and pointing to it not just because we have an ego and we want to see our name in print in a document, in a paragraph, but because that will motivate us. That will create even more incentive to get to work.
And because it will help the policies that come out of this process to make business sense, right?
Yeah.
Because what we want is to have a level playing field, regulations that help companies through the transition, etc. Now, but on the other hand, yesterday I was lucky to have dinner with the CEO of a very big cement company. And next, an ambassador has been in this process for a while. And the CEO couldn't care less what comes out of this process. What he wants is to do business. And he has an incredible product, and he comes here in every single COP, and every year he comes with new innovation, and he's more exciting than ever, and he makes even cement being something exciting, which we would have never imagined that would be the case. So what I mean is that the business community, and we will hear now, it's has a very good direction of travel. They know what they're doing, and they are responding to their clients, to the employees, to the finance sector, and to some of the regulations that then come in that direction, right? Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so we have here two big companies. So Joaquin, give us your views.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here and to listen to my colleagues, because this is my first time to a COP. It was also the first time to our CEO, Martin Betzelar. You probably been in the Spanish pavilion, you know who he steps up, but anyway.
It's been an impressive entry to a COP, eh?
So, in any case, I introduced TEPSA is an oil and gas company. So we are in the blacklist, but trying to move out of it. And we belong to Mubadala, who is the majority shareholder, so a sovereign fund, and also to Carlyle, another private equity from the US. Mm-hmm. And as Maria said, we are here for doing business. This is what our shareholders ask us, and they see clearly the opportunity. If we see the world of the, let's say, investment funds and large, let's say, capital investors, there are two types. Those who still stick to the, let's say, gray or black business, no? There are few, every year less and less, and those who want to invest in the clean businesses of the future. But few people invest in the energy transition, which is the difficult part, because there are a lot of pledges, but really replacing all the, let's say, fossil fuels with renewables is not so easy when you don't plan infrastructures, regulations, customers who need to change their processes also to replace one fuel with another. And sometimes the devil is in the details. Now you need to sort out this. And this is what we are doing at CEPSA. We have a strong commitment by our shareholders. They back up with enough money, financial resources, and we have a lot of technical resources to have a very concrete plan, because we all talk about 2050. We have made also our pledge to become net zero in 2050, but what it matters is 2030, because this is where we need to show that there is a downturn in CO2 emissions. And what we think is that customers are already asking for this. So we have, at least in Europe and in Spain, we have a very clear framework, regulatory framework, which is making companies pay for CO2 emissions, and more sectors are entering this CO2, let's say, tax system. We have even obligations for companies to replace fossil by renewables. But then we have the end consumer who is asking also and is willing to pay, to a certain extent, a premium to be sure that what they get is not harming the planet. And this is what our company is now doing. We started by shutting down one refinery. We had 3, now we have only 2. One in the Canary Islands is already being decommissioned. And the other 2, what we are doing is, first of all, say, replacing all the electricity, natural gas, grey hydrogen by its renewable equivalent, so renewable electricity, biomethane and green hydrogen. So this is reducing our scope 1 and 2 emissions, and our, let's say, target is to reduce by 55% by 2030. But most importantly, we want to replace the sales, the fuel sales that we are doing to our customers with sustainable fuels. So this is really what it matters, which is the scope 3 emissions for energy companies, because emissions come from the fossil fuels that we sell to maritime companies, airline companies, road transportations. So here, this is where we put together a plan to replace gradually this fossil fuel production with biodiesel, sustainable aviation fuel, methanol, green methanol. We have made these past days an announcement of an alliance with Maersk, which is one of the largest maritime companies, to start replacing their fleet with methanol ships and to supply them green methanol. And finally, green ammonia. So all this with a plan, a very specific plan, to build 2 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity in our sites. We have industrial land. We are sitting by a port, 2 ports, in fact, the Algeciras port, which is in the Strait of Gibraltar, and the Huelva port. We have a lot of infrastructures there. We have electrical connections. We have water ourselves, because we are reducing the consumption of our refineries. But then we are also using recycled water, so water that has been treated but is released to the sea, is not usable for drinking or for agriculture. We use it to produce the hydrogen. And with this hydrogen production, so we are aiming at 300,000 tons by 2030. This is the green molecule that we then use to produce these sustainable fuels, the biodiesel, the SAF for aviation, all the others. But this is just the beginning. If we talk about the methanol announcement that we did, we are planning to produce 300,000 tons of green methanol, and it's already a very relevant project. But it's less than 2% of the fuel that is being sold in the Algeciras Bay. Just 1 port of Spain, just 1 port in the European Union, just 1 port in the world. So if we want to replace completely the fossil fuels from the maritime traffic, we need to do a lot more. And this needs infrastructures, because we can do a lot in our refineries because we have infrastructures. But if we need to scale up this, we need more electric lines to move power from where it is produced to where it is used. And we need then hydrogen pipes to connect the different, let's say, production to the different consumption units. And this is where we need clearly a cooperation. The future is bright. No, we are in Spain at least. We are very, very happy because we have a lot of renewable capacity. In fact, Spain is doubling in the coming 2 years the renewable production, and by 2030 more than triple the electricity production, which is what we need. No, is the green electrons what we need to produce green hydrogen. But we need a lot more if we really want to achieve a 55% reduction by 2030. And this is very important, of course, for all of us. If we look into the future, we clearly see that people ask, no, who is paying for this? No, if there is a premium, this is expensive. This is something that customers, yes, they are aware. They are willing to pay a certain premium, but green hydrogen is very expensive. Sustainable fuels are even more expensive. And to a certain extent, it's true. So we need to scale up to gain economies of scale in production of electrolyzers, in the production of these sustainable fuels. But we at CEPSA, we have identified those customers to start with who can use these fuels in, let's say, concentrated and very precise locations. In the case of the maritime sector, we talk about the Algeciras Bay, and we talk about big container ships. And we have made calculations. We are in discussion with these companies, even paying a big premium for the green fuel. A maritime company who is bringing in a container ship thousands of goods, no, from iPhones to tablets to whatever, no, the impact on every single item of paying this extra premium is just a few cents. I think this is the same thing for the aviation sector, for airplanes. If you pay extra premium for sustainable aviation fuel, the impact on every single airplane ticket is just a few euros. It's nothing. And this has a huge impact in terms of CO2 abatement because it's a very concentrated source. And this is where we think we should put our efforts in doing something meaningful that can be actionable immediately, that has a demand already there, and that can bring substantial CO2 reductions in the short term. And from there, hopefully, once you have a success story, you can scale up and bring more and more businesses into action.
Okay, thank you. David.
Yeah, just a couple observations. Thank you again for having me. I was at an event last night on green shipping, and a woman came up to me and introduced herself, and she said, I'm so-and-so, and I said, I'm David Roth, I'm with Amazon. She said, Amazon, why are you here? And it wasn't a curious, why are you here? It was, why are you here? It was in a very negative tone. And maybe everyone else that I've met over the last 10 days has just been very polite and hasn't asked the same question in the same way. But I've gone to COPs in the past, and really to only receive that interaction or engagement once from somebody, I think is a big step change from in years past. Right. And I've been really energized and excited about the types of conversations that businesses are having with each other, businesses are having with NGOs and civil society, the conversations we're having with government. And so it was a funny interaction. And I just wanted to pick up on a couple points. One on concrete. We just a funny story, has nothing to do with the panel, other than we recently lost someone to a company that manufactures concrete, Carbon Cure, which is a small Canadian company. And I thought Amazon was an exciting place, but apparently concrete can be even more exciting than technology. But it's also a good anecdote because they developed this concrete company in Canada that developed a technology that reduces emissions in concrete by 40%. And they were struggling with finance and buyers, and Amazon invested in this company, not only invested in the company, but agreed to take on quite a bunch of their production. We're now using that concrete in our buildings, including in our second headquarters in Virginia, and making that technology and that commodity now available to the wider community in Virginia. So it's just one small way that having business at the table, I think, is helpful. We're really excited about the engagement we're having on a number of fronts. I know, Joaquin, you mentioned sustainable aviation fuel and green shipping as well. And that's another area where I think businesses are coming together to help solve the issues of emissions in those hard-to-abate industries. Hard-to-abate sectors. So one example that Amazon has helped drive is in green shipping. We formed a coalition with other maritime services buyers called ZEMBA, Zero Emissions Maritime Buyers Alliance. Started with 4 companies. Now it's at 24 companies. And we had our first RFP back in September for 600,000 20-foot containers. And we're awarding that now. And it's helping to accelerate in sending signals to the market that there is a market out there that's willing to pay a premium for green shipping. The same with sustainable aviation fuels. We've started a buyers alliance there as well, and it's going to drive down the price of SAF. And so we're really excited about that as well. Maybe just a few facts about our presence in Spain. If you'll indulge me for a few minutes, we've been there for 12 years. We're now up to 22,000 employees. We had a commitment to be 25,000 by 2025. I think we're going to go way past that, hopefully. We're at 22,000 employees across a range of different businesses there. It's spread across 40 different sites. And another employment story that's part of our story in Spain is the companies that are selling, the small businesses that are selling on Amazon in Spain. So we have over 15,000 small businesses in Spain that support 35,000 jobs just by virtue of connecting with customers in Spain on Amazon, but outside Spain as well. And maybe just one last piece, or maybe 2 last pieces on our presence in Spain. A big part of our presence in Spain has to do with data centers. Amazon Web Services is part of Amazon. We have a $2.5 billion investment in Madrid, and that's creating thousands of jobs as well. And on the renewable side, I think someone mentioned that we're the largest procurer of renewable energy now in the world. We're at over 20 gigawatts. We're the biggest procurer of renewable energy in Europe and in India and North America, the UK, and globally. A big part of that commitment to be 100% renewable by 2025, and we're 90% of the way there, is our capacity in Spain. So we have 29 on-site solar projects. We have another, I think, 35 large-scale off-site wind and solar projects. We have a 67 megawatt capacity now. We just announced another 24 projects that are going to take us to over 2 gigawatts of renewable energy in Spain, which is just incredible. Part of our responsibility, and we're not doing a very good job of it, is telling the win-win aspect of those investments.
Yeah.
So it's a few $100 million of investments in Spain. It's more than 1,000 jobs that are supported over the life of these projects. And Amazon has a responsibility as a procurer of the energy to tell that story and why it's in the economic interest for governments to facilitate these investments. We also have a responsibility within the company to demonstrate that it's a win-win proposition as well. And so, happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me, and it's been a good conversation so far. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. I fully agree that it's about the exciting conversations between sectors and companies that we are seeing all around climate action. No? There are new ways of collaborating and of working together and having amazing results, as in the case of Tesla or Amazon or in the big companies. But maybe the challenge we still have is how to bring the small and medium companies. No? And I would like to hear your views on what do you think your organizations can do to bring more this huge part of the business sector, no? That is made of SMEs.
I think they are already coming. It's not. I mean, perhaps I have been too negative, but they are already there. They are already engaging. They are already, trying to find ways in which they, become linked to a commitment of net zero. I mean, there are many of them, but the problem is the lack of awareness in many others. There is not, and the lack of awareness has to do with policies that are not yet there. Like you are talking about Spain, also my country, and there is a big push. There is a kind of good, but that's not the case in many economies. I mean, it's far away from being in the public debate. It's far away from being in the daily struggle of a company. So I think the big players have an important role. Let me put it like that. I mean, Amazon, you have an incredible capacity also to influence in your supply chains, of course, a kind of approach, not imposing, because that's also an area where you have to be very careful, but bringing an innovative approach in terms of pollution, in terms also of, thinking also workers' behavior. There is a way forward in these countries where you do not have this setting, which has to do with the policies and which has to do also with the role of big players. And that's, of course, our role as employers and business organizations. But it's not that the small and medium companies are not engaging. They are engaging, and I mean, it's amazing also here to see many small companies also being engaged because of many. The problem is that the policies are far away from being conducive in many countries to get them there, and that's what we need to push. Sometimes when business organizations push for changing the policies, we are accused of, global. How do you call it? It's a discussion that we have in other UN agencies on corporate governance and corporate also action, which has been. But at the end of the day, if we are not pushing for these changes, if we are not pushing the policy, the regulations, the institutions, we will not get there. And in some countries, this push from a policy and advocacy perspective is needed.
We need policies attached to the reality of businesses, no?
Of course.
Yes, thank you.
European applauses.
So we are very. So this is a very real issue, and that's why I have only been the CEO for Women Business for 3 years, and the first thing I presented to the board is a proposal to work with SMEs, and so we created the SME Climate Hub as a platform where we provide a mechanism for SMEs to commit to a similar, to something at their level, to commit to net zero, but at their level, something very simple. But also we provide them calculators, education tools, action modules, etc. And I have to say that that's thanks to the partnership with Amazon, actually, that has been funded this work through our partnership with the Climate Pledge. And we survey these businesses like you do, and it is clear that for them it is lack of knowledge, lack of resources, and lack of time are the 3 barriers for them. And so you're right. That for many business, in the many priorities and with the little resources they have, this might not be an issue. But on the other hand, I can say that I'm also part of the Science Based Targets Initiative, and I'm in their board, which is the big brother of SME Climate Hub. And there, the business area that is growing the most is mid-sized companies in Southeast Asia that are asked by the big companies as part of the Scope 3 requirements to decarbonize. So I think many businesses are also seeing that they've been asked to do it and that it is an advantage. And the last point is that once they start to measure their emissions, often they see that emissions equal cost. Reduce emissions, reduce cost. And I find that we need to help them understand those. First, in some cases, it's not the case. But wherever is the case, this is a good business opportunity. We're far from what we need to do, and that's why organizations like yours are so important because of the huge reach that they have. But we work with the leading businesses and those that show the way for many others to come, those that fight for regulations to come, so that then there is a level playing field, incentives and regulations are in place for more business to be able to climate act. And that's why it is important what we're doing here, bringing it back to this discussion, because this is a policy place, a place where
exactly
the North Star is going to be given, and that will translate then down the line.
Totally.
And so exciting times. Thank you.
Noreen?
I mean, just to say, I know I keep harping on the NDCs and the NDC process, but country by country, as they consider each country specific to its governance and its circumstances and its priorities, if they would just look at the development of their NDC as a space that could be created to engage all of society, and in particular small and medium-sized companies, and reach out to them and try to understand what their needs and their realities are, and look to reflect that and address that in the NDC. I think it would be very powerful. And certainly when we did our first study of how NDCs were framed and what kinds of interactions led to them, and what kinds of discussions, it did seem that some governments in that first round did actively prioritize not just, their big chambers of commerce, but also, through states or through important cities to talk to local business people. So hopefully that kind of a model could be carried into the second round of NDCs, and also in some way, shape, or form be captured in the global Stocktake as a key element. Again, a mention of business that does not relate only to, well, how much money will business put on the table, what kind of finance will business provide, but how do we reach small businesses, even in issues that relate to adaptation and resilience? It's not only about mitigation. Thanks.
I would like to open the floor also for a question from the public. Lara?
Thank you very much. I'm Lara Lázaro from Elcano Oriol Institute. I'm also a lecturer in economic theory at the University College in Spain. It was really interesting to hear you, and I was wondering whether I could address this question to Noreen. You're talking about that integration, throughout your intervention today, of that corporate determined contribution to the national determined contribution. I know there were talks about this, or I seem to remember there were talks about this in Sharm el-Sheikh last year, and I was wondering, is this going to materialize? Is the business sector willing to, abide by the same reporting rules, etc.? And could we have a parallel process and then integrate, or are you thinking about the countries just integrating those corporate determined contributions at the outset? Thank you.
So I'll go ahead and answer unless you want to take other questions. Okay, so I think that depending on which countries we're talking about, there is already quite substantial reporting on carbon emissions or greenhouse gas emissions, both legally obligated in some jurisdictions, but also more and more either in response to expectations and even demands of investors or broader communities. So there's already actually a lot of that information and reporting going on. And I think the question would be how much more meaningful that would be if it was co-created between a national government and their local business community to determine what would be the best fit, the best way of doing it, rather than coming up, especially again as we talk about SMEs. If I understood your question correctly, that would be one really important part of the conversation that should occur in the development of Chapter 2 of nationally determined contributions.
Maria.
Yes, so on the corporate world, we already have our NDCs, and they're called science-based targets.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And the science-based targets for companies, they relate to company operations that go beyond, operate in many, many countries, right? And then the second thing that, I will call researchers to look, if you compare, so we have the Paris Agreement, we have the NDCs, and we have the inventories, and business have the GHG protocol. We have the NDCs, business have the Science-Based Targets Initiative. Countries have Article 6, and we have an emerging voluntary carbon markets. Now, let me tell you, and I see, but we tend to say, business. Well, countries are tackling Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. Businesses are tackling also Scope 3 emissions that cuts across the world. And I have to say that I would love, like an open-minded research community, to look at what is the impact that these science-based targets are having in the decarbonization of other countries. Because I can tell you from my conversations, there is a lot that is happening because it's being pulled by these large companies that have global operations. And this is dismissed in this process, coming back and being a bit controversial. We are ignored in the process, and yet driving an amazing transformation that is not driven by policies, but by the commitment of companies to a voluntary standard that is led by NGOs. And this is the biggest and most successful experiment that we have seen in the climate, in the corporate climate, in the climate world, I would say. And I see, and we can continue the discussion, but I would invite you to look at it with open eyes and to see the incredible adventure for some of these companies that are fighting to reduce their emissions in countries where there is no regulation, no commitment to do so. That they are taking responsibility of the Scope 3 emissions, even if they don't have a way to influence it. And so many will say, no, but companies are not achieving their targets because they are including the Scope 3 in their targets, and it's really, really difficult. So, yeah, anyway.
I fully agree. I fully agree that the real impact is coming from the companies. And I am so sorry, but we are run out of time, and I want to thank you for joining us in the panel, but I also want to congratulate you for your personal commitment. Maria, amazing results in 3 years in women businesses in terms of private sector involvement. Roberto, congratulations, the first ever pavilion for IOE in a COP, in this COP. Noreen, absolutely instrumental in bringing the voice of the private sector to this process for many years, and also Joaquin and David for very impressive climate action in your companies. And thank you all the audience for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Voilà.